It's The World This Week, 7 days for Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. We're in the company of Bernard Guetta, who is with flagship public radio station France Inter. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome back as well to Nicholas Vineker of Politico.eu.
Thanks.
And Elena Servitas of the Russian language service of sister station Radio France.
Flagman as well. Just for me not to be jealous.
Flagship sister station. Radio France International. The World This Week, where you could join the conversation for our flagship show on Facebook and Twitter, #World This Week. For more than 3 years, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange has been inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London. This Friday, he came out on the balcony to claim victory. He's wanted for extradition in Sweden over a rape investigation. Sweden, which has an extradition agreement with the United States which wants him over the 2010 leaking of thousands of diplomatic cables. Now, with a UN working group in Geneva arguing that Assange's stay at the embassy amounts to arbitrary detention, the man himself speaking out.
How sweet it is. This is a victory that cannot be denied. It is a victory of historical importance, not just for me, for my family, for my children, but for the independence of the UN system.
Well, I reject the finding of this working group. It's a group made up of lay people, not lawyers, and their conclusion is flawed in law. Julian Assange is a fugitive from justice. He's hiding from justice in the Ecuadorian embassy. He can come out onto the pavement anytime he chooses. He's not being detained by us. But he will have to face justice in Sweden if he chooses to do so. And it's right that he should not be able to escape justice. This is frankly a ridiculous finding by the working group, and we reject it.
Bernard Guetta, is it a ridiculous finding by the working group?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't think so. I'm personally very doubtful about this alleged Swedish rape made by Mr. help me. By this guy, by this fellow. But on the other hand, I have very mixed feelings about this situation, because I don't think at all that it was right to publish all these diplomatic mails. Because what was it for? Was it really useful for what, by the way? My answer would be no, not at all. I think it was very detrimental to foreign relations and specifically to diplomacy when we need diplomacy, and diplomacy need secret talks between diplomats and foreign affairs ministers. We cannot solve or try to solve the world problem on a public square with a world attendance and thousands of journalists writing and commenting those discussions.
It was 5 years ago, though. The context was different then.
Yes, the context was different, but the situation was already very tense. And in any case, even in a more peaceful world situation, I'm completely against those leaks. Because after all, we journalists are pleading for the secrecy of our sources, rightfully, I think. So how could we fight for the openness of the diplomatic discussions? I don't understand that. I don't agree with that.
It's not the WikiLeaks files as such that are being pursued in this case. It's Julian Assange over a rape investigation in Sweden. Does it amount to arbitrary detention, what's going on inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London?
Well,
I challenge anyone to follow the sort of cascading logic of this UN commission, because what they've done is essentially say, well, we find that the reasons Julian Assange is wanted for attempted rape in Sweden are invalid. So I don't know what kind of work they've done or whether they've traveled to Sweden and found that the prosecutor in Sweden didn't do their job to make it that, you know, this person should be allowed to go free. But on the face of it, the legal case remains. He is wanted for a crime in Sweden, and if he leaves this embassy, he will be he's eligible to be extradited back to Sweden. I follow what people say, that it's in a way it's his choice. He has the freedom to go and contest these charges in Sweden if he so wishes, and he's not doing that. Arbitrary detention, I have difficulty following the logic all the way through. That's all I'm saying.
Elena Servitas?
It's a very difficult situation. I mean, today when I was watching Julian Assange, I was comparing his face, very pale after 3 years detention, with the face even of Philippe Hamon. He's very well-toned, very healthy, and he's breathing well. And he said this guy will face justice anyway. So we understand what's going on. Well, we speak about Wikileaks. So I think we should address, first of all, to the Americans and even to the American journalists. While in New York Times they just started to get this depeche, they were thinking either we are publishing it, either we are not, because we don't want to become just the media for Julian Assange. But after, if you get this information, what are you going to do with it? I mean, should you keep it just for you, or should you broadcast it? That is a question.
It is definitely a question, and of course, and we can talk about Assange as well in the context of what's come afterwards. What with the revelations of Edward Snowden, which are of a different scale.
Yes, Edward Snowden. I mean, it's a different scale, and he's already like an enemy for United States. But for Russians, it's the kind of a guy we want to protect against United States. So it's a symbol of American, injustice or something. So we will use him just till the end. This story.
And there are a lot of people who feel as though Julian Assange is being persecuted. That they want to send him to Sweden to be able to send him to the U.S.
But Sweden's responded to that. They say there's no automatic extradition to the U.S. That's a decision that's taken on the basis of the evidence once he's back in Sweden, if he goes there.
I would never tell.
Sorry?
I would never tell.
Never. Don't let the Americans know he's there. That's one way of doing it. Well, that's if you think that, you know, he's being held in the embassy because otherwise the U.S. is going to immediately get its hands on him, that's one way of looking at it. But in fact, that's not exactly the situation. He doesn't leave that embassy because he's wanted for a crime in another European country, and that's the sort of bottom of it.
Well, I think he became basically a wanted man by the U.S. Because of the Wikileaks, because of the leaks. And I'm not a judge. I'm not a prosecutor. I don't know the file precisely. Of course, I don't. But nevertheless, when I read the accusation, I do think that they are very, very weak.
All right. We're going to continue to follow this and, of course, follow this case. David Cameron is firing on all cylinders. This Friday, the UK Prime Minister in Poland and Denmark as part of his push to get a deal at an EU summit in 2 weeks' time, one that will enable him to call for a Brexit referendum in Britain sooner rather than later. And after Tuesday concessions by the Council, the UK Prime Minister was already making his push back on home soil. Tuesday, he was speaking at to workers at a factory of a German-owned Siemens factory, by the way, in Chippenham, England, and crowing over acceptance that Britain get to wait 4 years before paying benefits to EU migrants.
So what have we got in this document? What we've got is basically something I asked for, which is that people shouldn't be able to come here and get instant access to our in-work welfare system. We should end something for nothing.
All right. And by the way, Paris traffic could not keep her away. Dana Kennedy.
I'm so sorry. It's so rude. I hate to be so American. And also, I'm sorry to miss the Assange segment. I think you're totally right. I mean, talk about a weak case. I think the fix was totally, and I'm sorry that's not the subject we're on now, but I think Julian Assange was completely set up, and it's a travesty.
All right.
I covered that case when it first happened. I spoke to those two alleged victims in Sweden. I'm a feminist. I spoke to them, and I really think it's just unbelievable he's been kept under house arrest for what he did up there. I just think it's a travesty. Anyway, sorry to be late. We'll go on to the next topic.
All right. Something that you and Nicholas can discuss after the show.
Over drinks, yes.
But David Cameron, his pitch, what did you think of those images of him going to a German-owned factory right after he gets that concession on Tuesday?
Well, Germany's Britain's ally on this question. Germany is, in many ways, what would you call it? The figure of authority in Europe, to put it politely, at the moment. And Germany has a stake in keeping Britain inside the European Union. And they've given themselves the role of brokering the negotiations to make sure the UK stays. And I think that's what we're seeing, a bit of salesmanship by David Cameron to workers in Germany, and saying, look, this is a decent deal. And in fact, this might work for you too if you're resentful of all the migrants getting benefits here. I think he's in a very precarious position at the moment, though, David Cameron, because now they have the documents, the period of speculation and dissimulation is over, and the reception is very poor in the UK. All the conservative tabloids and newspapers have condemned it. And it seems to me from reading the newspapers that David Cameron is and his cabinet has to sort of threaten people within the parliament, and to say, if you want a career in UK politics, then you better vote for
and
the
there was
Leave.
certainly this Friday a backlash against that. We could show the numbers of British citizens in favor of a Brexit. It's up 3% according to a YouGov poll for the Times to 45%. I mean, I don't know how much these polls actually mean. And I got to say, Dana Kennedy, we've underestimated David Cameron before. Most notably, before the UK general election, we said, he's not going to fare well. He won resoundingly. He got his Scotland referendum, the result he wanted there. Are we underestimating him once more?
Yes, I think he's a white Obama. I think you can't underestimate David Cameron. But I find the whole Brexit situation very peculiar. And my feeling is there's too many white people in Europe making the decisions at a time when a lot of people that are brown are coming in. And the white people really don't know what to do. They really don't have the issue down. It's a whole new Europe. It's changing rapidly. And we still have this sort of old Anglo-Saxon type of thought managing everything. I don't think it's going to work.
Well, what's going to happen when they vote in or out for Europe?
I think everyone's really, really afraid now of the migrants or the refugees, whatever you want to call them. I think everybody is going to be voting with their emotions. That's why it was so interesting in France, because you might have thought the National Front would make more progress, but France always surprises. I think France is also some country that can't be underestimated.
I just wanted to add, one British journalist just published a book there. This is London, Ben Judah, and he drew us a different image of London. He said that during this year, I have seen London changing. And so he just given us the pictures of migrants and people who came to London not so long ago, and they don't speak really good English. And this is in New London, and just make me afraid. And he's everywhere in the British press, and this is his view, and that's how he feels about his city. It's a bit...
It's unsettling because Britain has this reputation of always being moderate. And here we have a referendum where, as it's been said, the issue is about EU red tape, but subliminally, it's a lot about this migrant crisis.
Certainly, yes. Certainly, yes. And since the refugees crisis will increase during the next coming months, I'm rather pessimistic about the result of the referendum, of the British referendum, because after all, it's much easier to fight against the EU than to fight for it. And so during the campaign, we will hear in London and in the UK many arguments against the European unity. And I think that unfortunately Cameron could lose the referendum, which would be quite a catastrophe,
And what
both
about,
for the UK and for the rest of the European Union.
I was going to ask, what about the concessions that were spelled out by the European Council President Donald Tusk? Is Europe becoming more British, or in a sense?
Unfortunately not. Europe is becoming much more fragmented. Is it fragmented in English?
Fragmented, yes, definitely.
Yes, okay. And so Europe, the European unity is weakening week after week, months after months. And after the British exit, if there is a British exit, the situation will be very, very poor in the European Union. Very poor. I'm rather pessimistic about the situation.
We
Nicholas?
had already the situation with Denmark in 1992 when they had their own, when they was just entering the European Union and they had their condition to have their
Elena, excuse
judicial-
me, there is a
but-
big difference in Denmark or in France in 2005. It was a discussion, a referendum election about a new treaty. In this case, it will be about to remain or to leave the European Union. That's quite different.
I agree. I think it's an existential threat. There have been growing
Existential threat.
to the European Union as we know it today. The departure, that creating the possibility that you can withdraw and leave a wound in the flank of this great union is a very dangerous thing. It would encourage Marine Le Pen, who has explicitly modeled her approach to the Euro question after David Cameron's referendum.
Mm-hmm.
It would embolden her to have a similar referendum in France, and it would be cause really lasting damage. Remember, there's not too many people defending this thing at the moment, the European Union, and the people who, as I said before, who will be held accountable to a large extent, if Britain leaves, is Germany and is Angela Merkel, who has set the agenda in more ways than one on economic policy, on the migrants, on all kinds of things. If Britain leaves, it's going to be on her watch.
And we're going to pick up on those points. When we come back, we're looking more specifically on the latest pressure point for the migrants, that is to say, Syria. And stay with us. It's coming up later with The World This Week.